Okay, hi my dear CA final students. Hope you guys are doing well. It's been a long time. We are shooting this in lockdown. I hope you are doing fine. So today we are going to see some of the key areas or the amendments that ICA has given for the November 2020 exam. Now the amendments that I am going to cover are going to cover both the May 20 RTP as well as the November 20 RTP. And I hope you get a lot of benefit from this video. Okay, so let's see. Now, first of all, what they have changed here is they have changed the explanation part of the government company. So earlier it was not there and they have introduced that part. So we'll be seeing that. Now, how the notes will be placed is I've taken the screenshots from the RTP. So basically the RTP is there in front of you. The key areas of the RTP I'll be highlighting, and this PDF you will be finding it as a link in the description below. So you can simply download it and you can just refer that. There will be a lot of diagrams, a lot of interesting areas, a lot of stories for memorizing that we'll be seeing. So ensure that you are, having these notes printed with you so that you can easily refer it and complete with company. In this section, the following explanation has been inserted in the definition explanation for total voting power where shares with differential voting rights have been issued. So here what they've said is generally when we say government company, it means that the company that has been defined in section 2 subsection 45. So that is nothing but if there is any company in which the central government or the state government or partly by the central government and partly by one or more of the state governments holds 51% or more of the paid up capital of the company, and it includes a subsidiary of a government company. That is how the definition goes. But here what they have given is they have told us that government company, if it is having, if there is a company having differential voting rights, then 51% minimum, we don't have to check of the paid up capital, we have to check regarding the differential voting rights. So that is what they have said. Now what does it mean? Let's see with an example. Suppose if there are two companies, company A and company B. So you have company A here and you have company B here. Let's look for A first. A has equity share capital as well as preference share capital. The equity share capital is worth rupees 5 lakhs with face value 10 A. Preference share capital is 2 lakhs with face value 10. So that means, just a second, yeah. So that means that there are 20,000 preference shares in A Limited. So now what happens here is when we see the definition originally, we have to take 51% of the paid up share capital. So the company which is holding or any, if the government is holding, sorry, if the government is holding at least 51% of 5 lakhs plus 2 lakhs, then we'll say that A Limited or company A is a government company. Simple. So here we stress on the paid up capital. So now this is still there, but if the company is having differential voting rights, then what changes now? So let's take company B now. So you have equity share capital and preference. Preference I've kept at the same. So 2 lakhs face value 10. So you have 20,000 preference shares, no problem here. Now, in equity share capital, they have 3 lakhs with face value 10. So you have 30,000 normal equity shares. Generally, they don't use the word normal. I've used the word normal because just to make you understand that the voting rights here will be 1:1. So for 30,000 equity shares, you will be having 30,000 votes. But for the other 2 lakh equity share capital with face value 10, you have 20,000 equity shares with differential rights. Now, what does differential rights mean? Let's say there is a ratio that for every 10 shares, the shareholders will get only one vote in this case. Okay. Now, this is as per section 48 of the Companies Act, where you have variation of rights. So this is from there. So you have to understand here that these equity shares were issued under this differential rights mechanism, where the company, while issuing the shares itself, had announced that if a shareholder is holding 10 shares, then the shareholder will get one vote. Okay. So that means that if there are 20,000 equity shares in the company, then basically there are 2,000 votes. Okay. Now, of course, preference shares don't have any voting power. So I've put a cross signal or whatever. So they don't have any voting power. So basically here what we'll check, if the company is having differential voting right, what will we check? We'll check whether at least 51%. It should be 51, more than or equal to 51% of the total voting power, whether it is held by the government. So the government should have more than or equal to 51% of the total voting power for company B to be called as a government company. Simple. So here we don't look at the paid up capital because differential rights are involved. We look at the voting power, that is the total voting power. To vopo. Easy. So if differential rights are not there, then paid up capital. If differential rights are there, then we'll check the total voting power. I hope this concept is very clear. Be ready with a case study, a small case study that can come on the basis of this area. It's a very nice, amendment that is part of the RTP. Okay, from exam perspective. Then they have a simple amendment. This is just to understand. It's a very easy part. Just ensure that you are making a note of it in the exam. So this is the auditor of the company shall, in his report under section 143, make a statement as to whether the remuneration paid by the company to its directors is in accordance with the provisions of this section. So as per section 143, we'll have to see whether the remuneration has been properly paid. And then we have to also say whether the excess remuneration which is paid, which is basically more than the limit that we see generally in 197. You must be doing this in law, that if the remuneration is paid more than what is actually required to be paid, so if it is paid in excess, then the auditor will have to report the same. The auditor will have to report the same when the auditor is making the audit report under section 143 subsection 3. My students will know this answer as Binno ka dils. So you must have done the answer called as Binno ka dils. That is section 143 subsection 3, the code. So you have to ensure that you're writing with this point, that if the excess remuneration is paid, then the auditor should mention in his report. Finally, they have said in the report, you have to mention it as a separate section called as report on other legal and regulatory requirements. So you have to ensure that you're reporting as per under this section. So this can come as a very good MCQ question. So I'm just writing here MCQ. So be very alert with this area. That is, under which section do we have to write report on other legal and regulatory requirements? Okay. Simple area, two simple small amendments we have already seen. Okay. Let's go to the next part. Now this is in relation to 132, that is where the NFRA is inserted. So they have said that after subsection 1, the following subsection shall be inserted. They said that NFRA shall perform its functions through such divisions as may be prescribed. So this is given in the rules. Now they also said that every auditor referred to in rule 3 shall file a return with the NFRA. So auditor also has to submit a return to the NFRA now on or before 30th November every year in form NFRA 2. Again, a very important small area for the MCQ. So be very careful. That is form NFRA 2 and the auditor 30th November every year. Simple. Then you have the central government has amended the NFRA rules 2018 by the NFRA authority amendment rules 2019. So in that they said that the rule 3 will be inserted. The rule 3 will be inserted and there will be a lot of areas under rule 3. Okay. Now the NFRA penalties, we'll be seeing this also. Now the auditor will also will be liable to penalties. So let's see. If the company or any officer of a company or an auditor or any intervenes in every office, my students will know this by the code word DIMCA, director, manager, key managerial person, any person on whose direction the board of directors are accustomed to act. So that is nothing but officer. Then you have every officer of the company who is in default of the auditor or such other person shall be punishable as per the provisions of section 450 of the act. So separate penalty provisions is provided. Further, as per section 132 subsection 4 of the Companies Act 2013 as amended by the Companies Amendment Act 2019, NFRA, where professional or other misconduct is proved, have the power to make order for, and this was covered earlier as well. So they have said that the penalty will be 1 lakh rupees, but which may extend to 5 times of the fees received in the case of individual, that is proprietorship firm. And then they have 5 lakh rupees, minimum 5 lakh rupees, which may extend to 10 times. They have said 10 times if it is a case of what? Firms. Easy. Now debarring the member or the firm from being appointed. So the firm or the member can be debarred if they are working in the capacity of an auditor or internal auditor or undertaking any audit in respect of a financial statement or internal audit of the functions and activities of any company or body corporate, or performing any valuation as provided under section 247. You must know very well, being a student of group 1, that section 247 is nothing but the registered valuer provision is contained here. It's a very nice section. You can do it. We have a separate revision video for registered valuer, so if you're interested, you can go and watch that video. It has a lot of diagrammatic representations which can help you in a very nice manner to remember the registered valuer part. That is section 247 and the related rules. Then you have for a minimum period of 6 months or such higher period not exceeding 10 years. So they have given a imprisonment from 6 months to 10 years. 10 years. And then you have the, of course, the fine part is here for the individuals and then for the firms. Easy. This is in relation to the NFRA part. So just be careful under section 132. Now what had happened is when the amendments had come, so at that time I had made a note in one of my books, and after that the lockdown was announced, so I was going to upload the notes and we are going to shoot the amendment videos in a very proper and an organized manner. But however, because of the lockdown now, so what we are doing is, what I've done is, the notes that I had taken, I've taken an image of that and inserted in this PPT, so that it is very easy for you to grasp whatever area comes next. Okay. So ensure that you're understanding this diagram very well, because in relation to this diagram, we'll be seeing the next point and so on and so forth. Don't worry, the link in the description contains the PDF which contains all the diagrams. So basically what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take a PDF of this note of this PPT, and I'm going to put it there. So you'll have everything, whatever I'm saying. Okay. Then you have the SEBI LODR part, where you have said, as per SEBI circular dated 18th October 2019, through circular number CIR CFD CMD. So just say in a flow CIR CFD CMD 1/114/2019. So CIR CFD CMD 1/114/2019. Okay. So just to write the circular number in the exam, very easy to remember, not that difficult. CIR CFD CMD 1/114/2019. Okay. So this had come on 18th October 2019. They have said that certain important areas were covered in relation to resignation of auditors from listed entities and their material subsidiaries. Now, material subsidiaries, no, you need to know what is the meaning of that. So I've given that here. See, so you have to follow this line. So we are here. Material subsidiary are those which contribute more than or equal to. It should have been more than or equal to. So it is missed here. It should be more than or equal to 10% of the income, or have more than or equal to 10% of net worth of the consolidated income or net worth. So 10% of income or 10% of net worth. If any subsidiary is having 10% of income of the consolidated income, or 10% of the net worth of the consolidated net worth, then we'll call it as a material subsidiary. Okay. So here what is happening is, the auditor is resigning. The auditor is resigning. There is a resignation of auditor either from the listed entities or from one of their material subsidiaries. So if this happens, then what do we have to do? First, you have to keep in mind, we are going to learn it in parts. Okay. So just be attentive and careful. See this. First of all, the listed entity will have to disclose this. Will have to disclose this properly, saying that the auditor has resigned. So they'll have to compulsorily disclose this. Next is, the audit committee shall make recommendations in the auditor's ART RIP. What is ART RIP? ART RIP is nothing but appointment, remuneration, terms. That is the general art that we see, that is appointment, remuneration, terms, and then reviewing the independence and the performance of the auditor. Then reviewing the independence and the performance of the auditor, whether the auditors are functioning properly or not. Okay. So whether the audit committee will have to check whether after the resignation of the auditor, when the new auditor is appointed, whether all these conditions are being satisfied or not. Now they have come up with a very nice condition. Now this is important, so because this can come as a case study in the exam and as a simple, question as part of the resignation provision. So you have to be very, very careful in relation to the auditor's resignation. So let's see here. So they have said that auditor, if he resigns, he'll have to give reasons here. Sorry for my handwriting. It is resign plus reasons. Okay. Now the auditor will give a resignation plus the reasons to the listed company, and the listed company will have to, within 24 hours, just hold on. The listed entity will have to, within 24 hours, it will have to inform the stock exchange with the reasons that the auditor has given. So basically, whenever the auditor gives the reasons, then within 24 hours, the listed entity will have to inform the stock exchange so that the stock exchange can notify in a proper manner to the public. Okay. So when the auditor resigns, the auditor will be giving reasons to the listed company. Listed company will be informing the stock exchange within 24 hours after the reasons are received from the auditor. Simple area. So this is very important. So why? Because it is important, I am going to force into you the regulation number, because see, it is important. So if it comes in the exam, it is better if you mention the regulation number now. So let's see here, they have given that regulation 30 sub regulation 2. We are basically seeing regulation 30 sub regulation 2 in which part? We are seeing it in schedule 3 part A, clause A, subclause 7A. So you have to go like this: schedule 3 part A, subclause A, sorry, schedule 3 part A, clause A, subclause 7A, regulation 30 subregulation 2. So that is how it will flow: schedule 3 part A, clause A, subclause 7A, regulation 30 subregulation 2. Okay. So that is where this part is mentioned, and the auditor will have to check whether the auditor will have to comply with these requirements also, and the listed company will have to inform the stock exchange. Okay. Now there is this section in the Companies Act where we see removal of the auditor, that is section 140. Now this section will flow very well with this, especially when there is auditor resignation. So this part will flow very well here. And then you will have to, if it is a listed entity, then you'll have to also write the compliance requirements by the listed entity. So be very, very careful when this part comes in the exam. You have to give this SEBI LODR, what do you call, say, mentioning in the paper, so that the examiner also comes to know that you have read the amendments of the SEBI LODR part. Simple. I hope whatever I have explained, it is very simple, very easy to understand, not a difficult diagrammatic base helps. Okay, next. Now, whatever I have seen, whatever I've taught you, it is just written in the RTP. So that is a screenshot here with you. So basically, as per the stock exchange, stock and exchange, it is to be Securities and Exchange Board of India. Circular number CIR CFD CMD 1/114/2019, dated 18th October 2019, on resignation of statutory auditors from listed entities and their material subsidiaries. So we have already seen to make the timely disclosures. So that is an easy part to make the necessary disclosures, timely disclosures. Next, they have said that the audit committee of the listed entity inter alia has to make recommendations about ART appointment remuneration terms of the appointment of auditors of the listed entity. And also the audit committee is responsible for reviewing the independence and the performance of the auditors. Easy, simple area, exactly what we saw. Then you have further subclause 7 inserted in clause A in part A of schedule 3 under regulation 30 subregulation 2. What we read of SEBI LODR regulations requires detailed reasons to be disclosed by the listed entities to the stock exchanges in case of resignation of the auditor of a listed entity as soon as possible, but not later than 24 hours of receipt of such reasons from the auditor. So within 24 hours, they have to inform the stock exchange. This will be done by the listed entity. I hope it is clear till here. Next, after that, you have regulation 36 subregulation 5. This is a very simple part. That is nothing but SEBI LODR regulation lays down certain disclosures to be made part of the notice to the shareholders of foreign AGM, where the statutory auditors are proposed to be appointed, reappointed, including the terms of appointment. So if the old auditors are removed, and so in generally, if it is a case of casual vacancy, then the board of directors get to appoint. If it is a case, if it is a company which is other than a government company, so they are saying whenever the AGM is there and we are appointing a new auditor, so at that time we'll have to make the necessary disclosures to the shareholders. So not a big point, a very simple point which is given. Something in a question on this is not expected that much in the exam, so you can just read through it. Now just discuss with me and just imagine, suppose if there is a resignation of the auditor. Okay, suppose if there is a resignation of the auditor, then will it hamper the shareholders' confidence? Answer is yes. Now resignation of whichever auditor, if it happens, whoever are the shareholders, they'll feel very scared because their money is at stake and the auditor has resigned. So they will be scared that there is something going wrong in the company. So now that is also a logical point, but they have included here. What have they said? Resignation of an auditor of a listed entity, its material subsidiary, before completion of the audit of the financial results for the year due to reasons such as preoccupation may seriously hamper investor confidence and deny them access to reliable information for taking timely investment decisions. So nothing but whenever auditor resigns, what will happen? It will seriously hamper the investors' confidence. That is but natural. Okay, it is not the auditor's death. It is not that the auditor is going because of some health reasons. The auditor is resigning, and we are assuming here that he is resigning because maybe data was not provided to him, or there is something going wrong in the company in terms of financials. So then that is the reason that the auditor is resigning. Okay, I hope these points are very, very simple. Now I request you all to just go through these points, whatever I have shown you till now. Then ensure that you're going through whatever we did since the beginning till here. Take 5 minutes, pause this video, go through whatever you have done till now, read it well, see whether you have understood. If not, you have my WhatsApp number. You can just WhatsApp it to me. If you are part of my pen drive students, if you're part of my live batch also, which was conducted. So if you are part of that, then do go through the what do you call the notes and ask me the doubts. For other students, you can write in the comment section on YouTube. I'll be answering it there. Okay. Please go through it. Okay, let's continue and let's see the parts which are given ahead now. Now we are going to see something called as if the auditor resigns, then what can be the complications and what changes have they introduced till now. So let's see now how will this part function. So let's see the heading. Additional matters in SEBI LODR in relation to resignation of an auditor. So again, this is the chart which I had made. So I just took an image of that so that it is easy for you to understand. This was purely made when the RTP was released. So the chart is as it is. Okay. So let's see. Now what they're saying is an interesting part they've gotten, and it is very logical also. When you read with me, you'll understand that, yeah, it makes sense because, yeah, auditors should comply with these requirements. So let's see. What they're saying is, suppose after the end of any quarter, if 45 days have not elapsed. So here I have taken quarter 1, quarter 2, as per the financial year, quarter 3, and then I've taken quarter 4 here. Okay. So you have April, May, June as quarter 1, July, August, September, quarter 2, October, November, December, quarter 3, and January, February, March as quarter 4. So now what they are saying is, if after quarter 1, if within 45 days the auditor resigns. So let's say that this is June 30th, 2020, and you have here September 30th, 2020. So this is our second quarter period, and after the first quarter ends, that is 30th June 2020, within 45 days the auditor resigns. So the 45th day is ending somewhere here, which I have marked as a small circle. So let's say if the auditor resigns within the 45 days, then the auditor will have to issue the audit report or the limited review for quarter 1. The auditor will have to give his audit report or the LR for quarter 1 compulsorily before the auditor actually leaves the office. So after he resigns also, he has to submit his Q1 report. Now they're saying if 45 days is over after the quarter ends, for example, after 30th June, if 45 days is already over, and then the auditor says that he wants to resign. Basically, the auditor is in quarter 2 only, but the auditor is now resigning as on this date. Earlier, we had seen that the auditor is resigning as on this date, that is during those 45 days. But now the auditor is resigning as on this date, that is after the 45 days are over, but before Q2 ends. So what they're saying is, if the auditor resigns after 45 days, then you only imagine if the new auditor comes in, the new auditor will have to get settled, understand the company's business and everything, and then the new auditor will have to, in a hurry, submit the Q2 report. But what they're saying is Q2 audit report, that is audit report. So what they're saying is, if the auditor resigns after the 45 days, then the auditor himself will have to issue the audit report or the limited review for Q1 as well as Q2. So auditor is resigning after 45 days. The auditor will have to submit the Q1 report for sure, because that is already gone. And the quarter which is going on, the Q2 report also, because substantial period of Q2 is already over. We are done with 45 days of Q2 as well. Okay. So they are saying that the auditor will have to give Q1 as well as Q2 report. Okay. Now this is applicable for any quarter. So if suppose the auditor is resigning after quarter 2, then after quarter 2, we'll be seeing if 45 days has elapsed or not. If 45 days have already elapsed, then the auditor will have to give Q2 plus Q3 report. If 45 days have not elapsed after Q2, then the auditor will have to give only the Q2 report. Simple. And we are assuming that if the auditor was the auditor for Q1, then the auditor would have given the Q1 report also. Okay. Now let's go to the last part. Now what they're saying is, if the auditor has completed the first 3 quarters of the year, the auditor has completed first 3 quarters. Then what they are saying is, if the auditor resigns after the first 3 quarters and after completing the first 3 quarters as the auditor, if he's resigning in the fourth quarter, then they are saying then he should be required to issue the audit report for the fourth quarter also and for the financial year also. They are saying ki, see, if the auditor is leaving in the fourth quarter after completing the first 3 quarters, then he knows the complete business of the company. He knows what areas are not good in the company, substantial part at least. He knows most of the problems that are going on in the company. He knows the qualifications that are to be given. He knows most of the areas. So now unnecessarily when he resigns, the new auditor will have to come in again, knowledge of the client's business, test of control, test of details, analytical procedures. All this will go on again and again and again and again. So they are saying ki if the auditor has completed first 3 quarters and if he's resigning in the fourth quarter, then the auditor will have to compulsorily submit the audit report for the fourth quarter as well as for the financial year. Easy, simple logic, very simple to understand. So in this, we are divided into 3 parts. So what are the new things that have come? So we just put 3 parts in relation to auditor's resignation. So if it comes in the exam, you know exactly how to deal with the case study. So first I'm writing here within, just a second, yeah, within 45 days. Okay. Then you have after 45 days, and then you have after 3 quarters. After 3 quarters. So within 45 days, after 45 days, and after 3 quarters. Okay, very nice to understand, very simple, easy area. Okay. Now let's see the next part. Then you have during the period when auditor resigns till he submits the report. So auditor has resigned, but he has to still submit the report. For example, here, let's take this case only. Let's see the auditor has resigned, but the auditor has to give the Q1 and Q2 report. So what will happen here is the management and the auditor will have a strange relation. You know now what is the strange relation? It is like, you have broken up with someone. You had a girlfriend or boyfriend and you have broken up with someone, but you're still in the relation because that other person doesn't want to get married. Okay, so the girl tells the guy, yeah, see, we are over, we are done, but let's pretend we are in a relation, otherwise my parents will make me get married to someone else. Understanding that. So what is the problem here is both know that, okay, this person is going to leave now, they are not a part of my life, but now the person is still stuck there. The person is still stuck there because he has to complete the report. So what they're saying is during the period when the auditor resigns till he submits the report. So they are saying during the period when the auditor resigns till he submits the report, he's stuck with the management. So here the management and the auditor will not be, on good terms. But just ask yourself, should the management cooperate with the auditor so that the auditor can give the audit report? Yes or no? The answer is yes, 100% yes. So what they're saying is, if it is a case of a listed company or a material subsidiary and the auditor is resigning, then if due to non-cooperation of the management, audit process is hampered, if the auditor is not getting the required material, if the management is not providing the books of accounts on time, if the management is not providing, let's say, access to the godown where the stock is kept. So if all these things are hampered, then the auditor shall approach the chairman of the audit committee. Imagine the auditor entering the door with the relevant documents. So he's having documents in his hand, plus information sought by the auditor from the management. So the auditor also has the information that the auditor had asked the management. So he's carrying that proof also. You see, I had asked the management for this information, but they are not providing me or not giving me access to this information. Now the audit committee shall deliberate. They will discuss on this matter. They will deliberate on this matter and inform the auditor and the management regarding their final decision. Okay. So very easy area. If there is non-cooperation from the management and the audit process is hampered, then the auditor will approach the chairman of the audit committee with the relevant documents and the information sought by the auditor from the management. He'll carry the proof that he had approached the management for the necessary information, and the audit committee shall deliberate. Now they will deliberate and inform the auditor and the management. Okay. So now they are saying that inform the stock exchange about the audit committee's views within how many hours? Within 24 hours. So they are saying that the audit committee additional requirement here is they will have to inform the stock exchange regarding the audit committee's views within how many hours? 24 hours. So that even the stock exchange knows what the audit committee has decided for the auditor and the management. So very simple point, very easy point, very simple point to understand and to keep in mind. Just remember that the audit committee will have to inform the auditor, the management, and the stock exchange. Just that for stock exchange, you have to inform them within 24 hours regarding the decision that the audit committee has taken. Easy part, very simple to understand this part also. So not that tough, very easy amendments if you are able to understand it very nicely. So you can write in the comment section on YouTube whether you have understood these amendments very clearly and whether they are really helping you in your preparation. Okay. So let's see here. All listed entities or material subsidiaries shall ensure compliance with the following conditions while appointing or reappointing an auditor. So they are saying that if the auditor resigns within 45 days from the end of the quarter of the financial year, then the auditor shall, before such resignation, issue the limited review or the audit report for such quarter. Okay. So within 45 days, they have to issue the report of the previous quarter. If the auditor resigns after 45 days from the end of a quarter of a financial year, then the auditor shall, before such resignation, issue the limited review or the audit report for such quarter as well as the next quarter. So the quarter that is already gone and the quarter which is going on currently. So they have to give the report for the same for both the quarters. Okay. Then, notwithstanding the above, if the auditor has signed the limited review or the audit report for the first 3 quarters of a financial year, then the auditor shall, before such resignation, issue a limited review or audit report for the last quarter of such financial year, as well as the audit report for such financial year. This is straight from the RTP. So there is no change. If you see the RTP, it is the same language. In fact, it is just a screenshot from the RTP. Okay. So you can if you write this language, you are basically writing what ICAI requires. Okay, so I've just taught you the same thing. I hope it is beneficial. Okay, next is B, that is other conditions relating to resignation shall include, and they have given here certain areas. Let's see. Reporting of concerns with respect to the listed entity or its material subsidiary to the audit committee. So exactly what we had discussed, the same thing. In case of any concern with the management of the listed entity or material subsidiary, such as non-availability of information, if the information is not available, then they are saying non-cooperation by the management, if it is there, which may hamper the audit process, the auditor shall approach the chairman of the audit committee of the listed entity and the, just a second, please hold on. And in case the auditor proposes to resign, now if the auditor proposes to resign, what are they saying? Just a second. Okay, one second. Okay. And in case the auditor proposes to resign, all concerns with respect to the proposed resignation along with the relevant documents, so all the relevant documents shall be brought to the notice of the audit committee. In cases where the proposed resignation is due to non-receipt of information, that is where there is information not provided to the auditor, explanation from the company, the auditor shall inform the audit committee of the details of information, explanation sought and not provided by the management as applicable. Okay, so whenever this line is given here, you should read it as or. So information or explanation, and here also it is information or explanation. Okay, so that is it, simple. Then you have, on receipt of such information from the auditor relating to the proposal to resign, as mentioned above, the audit committee or the board of directors, as the case may be, shall deliberate on the matter. So they'll deliberate on the matter and communicate its views to the management and the auditor. So they shall communicate the views to the management and the auditor. Easy. So that is it. And finally, you have the information disclosure part. Disclaimer in receipt, in case of non-receipt of information, in case of listed entity, its or its material subsidiary does not provide information required by the auditor, to that extent, the auditor shall provide an appropriate disclaimer. So simple, your SA 705, appropriate disclaimer in the audit report, which may be in accordance with the standards on auditing as specified by ICAI. That is nothing but, we already know it. It is SA 705, one of the best essays that you have understood. Next, the listed entity or material subsidiary shall ensure that the conditions as mentioned in 6A and 6B above are included in the terms of appointment of the statutory auditor at the time of appointing or reappointing the auditor. In case the auditor has already been appointed, the terms of appointment shall suitably be modified to give effect to 6A and 6B above. Okay. So finally, they are just saying that in the terms of the auditor, we have to ensure that all these things are included. That the auditor, if he's planning to resign, then the auditor will have to give the necessary reports as per whatever has been given in the SEBI LODR regulations. So what they are saying is whatever is there, we have to now start including all these matters in the terms of appointment itself. So it is clear between the auditor as well as the management in relation to this part. And what they are also saying is if there is already an auditor who is being appointed, then the terms of appointment shall be suitably modified to give effect to 6A and 6B above. Okay, so they are saying that if the terms are already, if the auditor is already appointed, then you have to change as for 6A, 6B, so that the auditor can be properly be appointed in the organization as per these conditions. Okay, so very easy part. This is what we saw. Very, very important from exam perspective. Ensure that this area is extremely strong and also this part is extremely strong, because if they ask you any condition in relation to the auditor's duties, you are able to understand. 705 is very easy because you have already done 705 earlier, so you will be able to identify it in a much easier manner because it is now there in your bloodstream. So 705 is very simple. Next is the practicing company secretary shall certify compliance with the listed entity with 6A and 6B above in the annual secretarial compliance report issued in SEBI circular CIR CFD CMD first, or I think CMD 1, sorry, 27 2019, dated February 8 2019. Okay, so now this annual secretarial compliance report, now don't get it mixed up with the secretarial audit report that is given in section 204. When you do law, in that section 204 is there. Don't confuse this with that. This is separate. That is separate, and this is what? This is separate. Okay, so just be very aware of that and be very, very careful. Okay, again, what I request you is go through this part which we have done just now. After you took a pause earlier, read this carefully, see whatever queries if you are having. If you're my student, ask me on WhatsApp. If you have access to my number, if you don't have, then please write in the comment section. I'll be very happy to help your issue. Okay, so go through it. Okay, I hope it is done. I hope you had paused the video and you had read the earlier part. Okay, now let's go to the C part. C part is a very simple part, something that can come as an MCQ. I don't expect this to come as a full-fledged question because these are separate points. So let's see. Format of information to be obtained from the statutory auditor upon resignation. Upon resignation, the listed entity, its material subsidiary, shall obtain information from the auditor in the format as specified. So just let's see, as specified in annexure A of this circular. So there's an annexure A where they have given the format in relation to the information that is to be provided by the auditor. Okay. The listed entity shall ensure disclosure of the same under subclause 7A of clause A of part A of schedule 3 of regulation 30 subregulation 2 of SEBI LODR regulations. This we had read this entire chain of the area where it is covered earlier also. Then you have cooperation by listed entity and its material subsidiary during the period from when the auditor proposes to resign till the auditor submits the report for such quarter or financial year as mentioned above. The listed entity and the material subsidiary shall continue to provide all such documents or information as may be necessary for the auditor for the audit or the limited review. So they are saying that provide as much support as possible to the auditor in relation to providing all the necessary information and explanations. Then disclosure of the audit committee's views to the stock exchanges. Upon resignation of the auditor, the audit committee shall deliberate upon all the concerns raised by the auditor with respect to its resignation as soon as possible, but not later than, they have clearly given here, but not later than the date of the next audit committee meeting, and communicate its views to the management. So they are saying that as soon as the auditor is of the opinion that the management is not helping the auditor and the management is not able to provide the information, the auditor can approach the audit committee. The listed entity shall ensure the disclosure of the audit committee's views to the stock exchange as soon as possible, but not later than 24 hours after the date of such audit committee meeting. So they are saying as soon as the audit committee deliberates the matter, after the auditor complains, after the audit committee decides its views, it shall inform the stock exchange within 24 hours. Okay, so this is the C part, very, very simple, very easy to understand. Okay, simple part. You can just go through it. Finally, we'll complete this, then I'll give you time to read so that you can also read the entire chunk. So this part will complete our audit committee or audit or SEBI LODR regulations part, which is there in audit. So let's see. In case an entity is not mandated to have an audit committee, then the board of directors of the entity shall ensure the compliance of this circular. So we have seen this many times in law also, that wherever audit committee is not there, the board of directors will pitch in. We also see that in the appointment of the subsequent auditor under Rule 3. So we see that. So all these things are there. Next is, the stock exchanges are advised to bring the provisions of this circular to the notice of all the listed entities and the material subsidiaries, and also disseminate it on their website. So why are we giving information to the stock exchange? So that the stock exchange can place all this information on their website. Okay. In case the auditor is rendered disqualified due to operation of any condition mentioned in section 141 of the Companies Act 2013, then the provisions of this circular shall not apply. So if the auditor is disqualified, then of course this provision will not be applicable. Okay, so auditor disqualified, then of course this provision will not be applicable. Okay, the circular is issued in exercise of the powers conferred under section 11 subsection 1 of the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992, read with regulation 18 subregulation 3, 30 subregulation 2 and 36 subregulation 5 of the SEBI LODR regulation, and shall in addition to the provisions of the Companies Act 2013. For more details, they have given us the area where we can go and check these circulars. Okay, so you can go there, read it if time is available with you. Okay, so that is done. This is the part of SEBI LODR area. I would like you to go through this part, at least this area C part, and these 4 points. Simple area. Just be ready for the MCQs based question based on for these areas, these 2 areas. Whatever we had done earlier before these 2 slides, those are of course very important for a 4-mark question or a 6-mark question. So go through this. Please go through this. Please pause the video. Go through this. Okay. Now let's enter the professional ethics part. Okay. Now in ethics, there was a big amendment on networks and network firms. Okay. So ICI has taken some clear stance in relation to network and network firms. A very nice amendment, something that required clarity since a long time. And now you will get a lot of idea regarding how a CA firm can be part of networks. So let's see. Joining association with networks by members in practice, it is hereby clarified that association with network as a medium of referral of professional work is permissible only if the network is registered with the institute. So the network has to be clearly registered with the institute, exactly how a proprietorship firm or a partnership firm of chartered accountants is registered with the institute. Next, they have given comprising only of chartered accountants or chartered accountant firms and governed by the institute's network guidelines as may be accessed at, and then they have again given you the link. So you can go to that link and then check it out. But that link, the data in that link directly is not that applicable for you. So, but what we have here is the area that I mentioned in the RTP. So let's see. Members' attention is also drawn towards the following provisions of the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. Hereinafter referred to as this act. So now what they have done in the RTP is, and they have given you the clause 2 of part 1 of the first schedule, clause 3, clause 5 and clause 6. So they have mentioned these clauses, and after that they say, in view of the above provisions, that is clause 2, clause 3, clause 5, clause 6 of part 1 of the first schedule, it is not permissible for members in practice to join networks by whatever name called other than the networks registered with the institute. They are making it clear that first of all the networks should be registered with the institute. Secondly, if there is a CA firm which is part of a network, then that network has to be registered with the institute. Okay, so very important thing. Members may note that joining such network as mentioned above may result in non-compliance of the above stated provisions of the Act, resulting in disciplinary proceedings in accordance with the provisions of the Act. So if you're joining the networks which are not registered with the institute, then it will lead to direct non-compliance. So after that, you have meaning of the word network and network firms. They have said a larger structure that is aimed at cooperation and that is clearly aimed at profit or cost sharing, or shares common ownership, control or management, common quality control policies and procedures, common business strategy, the use of the common brand name, or a significant part of professional resources. So now what they have said is there should be cooperation between the firms which are part of the network, and there is one of these areas, that is cost sharing, there is cost profit or cost ownership, control or management, that is common ownership, control or management. This is together. One second, just wait. Okay. Then common quality control policies and procedures, common business strategy, then use of a common brand name. All these things they have provided here, or they are a significant part of the professional resources. Okay. But then you will get more clarity when we read ahead. You will understand that okay, exactly what all permutation combination that works actually. Then they give network firm. Network firm means a firm or entity that belongs to a network. It means a firm or entity that belongs to a certain network. Now, this is again the notes that I had made earlier. So let's see if in professional ethics, if we are seeing the part of network. So let's see this. Now, what I'm telling is expect a question on this networks part in your exam. Okay, so just expect a question. The reason being there is a huge part in the amendments. When we read ahead, you will see that it's a big chunk. Of course, not all areas are important, but it's a big chunk of the amendments. So ensure that you are ready with this. 4 marks, I can say that can very well come from this area. Okay, so let's see. When do we say that there is a network of CA firms? Okay, so what they are saying is whatever we had seen earlier. I just made a code called PCR cooperate for common. We generally say common good, but here we'll say common cube. That is PCR cooperate for common cube. So PCR cooperate for common cube. If there is PCR cooperate for common cube, then we'll say that there is a network. When there is PCR cooperate for common cube, then we'll say there is a network. Okay. So what is PCR? PCR is profit sharing, cost sharing, and resources sharing. They are saying if there is profit sharing, cost sharing, resources sharing, then we can say that yes, they are part of the network firm. So wait for it then. Then they are saying cooperate. Cooperate if they are cooperating with each other in relation to what work has to be done, what client has to be served in which manner. So then they are cooperating with each other. Then that will again make them part of the network firms. Then you have common COOP, that is common quality control policies and procedures. And then you have common ownership, and then the common brand name, So common brand name. So what they are saying here is PCR cooperate for common COOP. PCR cooperate for common COOP. From Q you will have this quality control policies and procedures. Then we'll see why I have to mark those green bordering and everything. I'll tell you that. So when we read, you will understand where we are. Then after that, you have even unrelated entities forming association is not a network. So just because unrelated entities form an association, we cannot say that they are part of the network. We cannot say that they are part of the network. Okay. Now, what they have made it very clear is that if there is a common business strategy, then it is network. If they are saying that if there is a common business strategy, then there is definitely a network in place. So what I'll do is let me just underline with green only, so that green will be for permissible and red is for non-permissible. So let's see this. There is this common business strategy. Okay. Next they're saying is if they are working under a common brand name, then again that will be a network. Suppose if they are having these qualities, that is cooperate, quality, their quality measures they are taking in place, quality control policies and procedures are there. Again, we'll say that they are part of the network. So we'll see that ahead. Wait for it. If stuck, then you have, okay, now wait for this part. I'll come back to this part to help you understand. But let's read what is given in relation till here. Okay, so let's read that first. Now they have given us the concept of network here. So let's read this. To enhance their ability to provide professional services, firms frequently form larger structures with other firms and entities. Whether these larger structures create a network depends on the particular facts and circumstances and does not depend on whether the firms and entities are legally separate and distinct. So it does not depend on whether they are legally separate and distinct. For example, a larger structure may be aimed only at facilitating the referral of work. So they are just referring work to one another, which in itself does not meet the criteria necessary to constitute a network. So only if they are referring one work to the other. Suppose I am a CA firm which expertises in transfer pricing. There is a CA firm which expertises in maybe bank audits. Then I'm referring the client that I know, or some person who I know, or an organization that I know, to that other firm. So they are saying if this referral work is going on, then that does not meet the criteria for a network. Then they are just referring to one another, which is fine. That does not make them a network. Alternatively, a larger structure might be such that it is aimed at cooperation. Look at this now. Look at this. It is aimed at cooperation. And the firms share a common brand name, common system of quality control, significant professional resources. Consequently, is deemed to be a network. So just referral, not a network, but if there is cooperation, common brand name, then there is this quality control processes which are there in place, professional services are shared, professional resources are shared, then we'll say that they are forming a network. Okay. Then after that, they come to the next point. And what is the next point? Say, let's see. They are saying that the judgment as to whether the larger structure is a network shall be made in light of whether a reasonable and informed third party would be likely to conclude, weighing all the specific facts and circumstances that the entities are associated in such a way that the network exists. This judgment shall be applied consistently throughout the network. Okay. So now what is happening here is, now based on this line alone, no, I am expecting lot of case studies, not only in this attempt, but in the times ahead. Now this tells you that this is a very gray area. I'm telling you why this is a very gray area. The reason being, when they say that how the third party would likely to conclude, it clearly shows that it would have to be seen on case to case basis. So like in ethics, how we have the different questions that come in, giving different circumstances whether a person is guilty or not. Now you may get questions in ethics where you have to say whether this forms a network or not. So extremely important para, very important para, just to give you an understanding that you need to know exactly what constitutes a network and what does not constitute a network. So just be very, very, very careful in relation to this area. So this area which we just did, this one, this is a huge star. So in the exam, if they mention that there is cooperation, common brand name, common system of quality control, professional resources are shared, then you will see that yes, these firms form a network. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's see what more are they trying to say. Let's see. Where the larger structure is aimed at cooperation and it is clearly aimed at profit or cost sharing among the entities within the structure, it is deemed to be a network. Again, if there is cooperation and it is aimed at profit or cost sharing, they are going to share the cost, maybe by resource sharing, or by ensuring that one entity helps the other in the areas where the other entity is lacking, then that will be definitely forming a network. However, the sharing of immaterial costs does not in itself create network. So if there are small cost sharing, then it cannot be called as a network. In addition, if the sharing of cost is limited only to those costs related to the development of audit methodologies, manuals and training courses, this would not in itself create a network. So if they are just sharing the uh, audit methodologies, the manuals, the training courses. They have the common training course where the employees of both the firms come and sit, attend the training course, see what is going on. They learn more about the GST compliance matters, or they learn more about the audit procedures or the new areas that have come in. So if they are learning, forensic audit can be an area. So if they are doing all these activities, then basically you will not say that it is a network, because they are just doing training activities together. So this is a case of would not. So this is a case of what? Would not. Okay. So be very, very careful. This would not create a network. So again, the keyword here is, again, I'll be marking it as in blue. So here again, when you see, this is again important. So wait for this in the exam. So I'm just trying to help you locate what to wait for in the exam. So this is your cooperation, clearly aimed at profit or cost sharing. Then we'll say that it is a network. My dear students, I hope you're understanding, because in the exam, see, if they give you this entire sentence, there is A and associates, B and associates, they are forming a network, and there seems to be a cooperation, and they are going for cost or profit sharing. What is your opinion? Can we say that they form a network? Answer is yes, yes, because you need to know this line. So ensure that the area that I'm marking, or let's do one thing, I'll highlight the area in yellow only, so that you don't have to worry at all. So this is cooperation, profit or cost sharing. Okay. So again, this forms a network. Okay. आगे देखते हैं. What is given ahead? Let's see. Then they are saying that further, an association between a firm and an otherwise unrelated entity to jointly provide a service or develop a product does not itself create a network. Again, if they are just jointly providing a service or developing a product, if they are developing a common product, then we cannot call them as a network. Then they do not create a network. Okay. So a very simple area. Then they do not form a network. Okay. Next, after that, we are looking at where the larger structure is aimed at cooperation and the entities within the structure share common ownership, control or management. It is deemed to be network. Again, new the word that is again coming again and again, that is the word is cooperation. So sorry for this, one second. Yes, the word is cooperation. Cooperation and the entities within the structure share common ownership, control, management, then it is deemed to be a network. This could be achieved by contract or other means. So again, what we'll do is we'll highlight it. Sorry for that. One second. Your cooperation, sharing of common ownership, control, management, then it is deemed to be a network. Then it is deemed to be a network. Simple area, easy to understand, very simple. Goes in our blue star. Okay, next. Now let's see, where a larger structure is aimed at cooperation and the entities within the structure share common quality control policies and procedures. It is deemed to be a network. For this purpose, common quality control policies and procedures are those designed, implemented, and monitored across the larger structure. So again, what they are saying is, they are saying that if there is again the keyword cooperation, if you see all the blue star that you have marked, no, this word is always there. See here, cooperation. Then see here, cooperation. Then let's see here also you have cooperation. Again, you have cooperation. Okay. Cooperation, they share common quality control policies and procedures. It is deemed to be a network. So again, they are saying it is deemed to be a network. Simple. So if they have common quality control policies, they decide what kind of services you are going to provide, what are going to be the systems and controls in place within the firm. So if they are basically, if I say in a standards format, no, if I say if their SQC is the same, if their SQC is common, SQC1 is common, then we'll say that yes, they're complying with the same SQC1, that is basically their policy and procedures, ethical requirements. If they are somewhat matching, then we'll say that there is cooperation, share common quality control policies and procedures, and they'll form a network. Okay. Next, they say that where the larger structure is aimed at, again, cooperation with the structure share, and within the structure share a common business strategy. So here it is business strategy. Again, you get cooperation, and it is deemed to be a network. So let's mark the above 2 points as with blue. So again, form a network, again, form a network. Sharing a common business strategy involves an agreement. So for the common business strategy, I've said that there should be an agreement by the entities to achieve common strategic objectives. An entity is not deemed to be a network, a firm, merely because it cooperates with another entity solely to respond jointly to a request for a proposal for the provision. So if they basically don't have an agreement, but they just merely cooperate with each other to respond jointly to a request or a proposal, then you have to understand that this is not a network. This is not a network. Okay. So there has to be an agreement. So I've circled the very key, most important word in this part, that is agreement. So when there is a common business strategy, there has to be an agreement between them. There has to be cooperation. Then we can call them a network. Okay. Then where the larger structure is aimed at cooperation and the entities within the structure they share the use of a common brand name, it is deemed to be a network. So again, they are saying that if there is a network, if there is a common brand name and there is cooperation. A common brand name includes common initials or a common name. A firm is deemed to be using a common brand name if it includes, for example, the common brand name as part of or along with its firm name when a partner of the firm signs an audit report. So when there is a common brand name, when the partner signs an audit report in the name of the firm. So that is this. So basically we are looking at this part now. That is here, cooperation is there, common brand name is there, then we'll call it a network again. So that again forms your blue part. So on this slide, you see most of the areas are network, 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 network. And then here, if agreement is not there for common business strategy, then we have said that it is not a network. It is just basic mere cooperation without an agreement. Okay. Let's see the next part. Even though the firm does not belong to a network and does not use a common brand name, okay, so it is not part of a network, does not have a common brand name as part of its firm name, it may give the appearance that it belongs to a network if, very important part, very, very important part, if it makes reference in its stationery or promotional material to be member of an association of firms. Very important part, if it mentions in the stationery that it is part of a network, even though it is not using the common brand name, it is not using the common brand name, still we'll say that it is part of the network if it uses the reference of the network in the stationery or the promotional material of the firm regarding the association of firms. Okay. Accordingly, if care is not taken in how a firm describes such memberships, a perception may be created that the firm belongs to a network. Mark it as a very, very important point. Very important point. In the exam, a nice case study can be drafted just based on this. If I would have been the examiner, I would have definitely put a case study on this, because the students are continuously thinking common brand name नहीं रहेगा तो network of firms नहीं है, firm network का part नहीं है. So when they are always thinking that if the common brand name is not there, then it is not part of the network. But if it is mentioning in its stationery or promotional material that it is part of such association, then it will be deemed to be part of that network. So very, very important. Be extremely careful regarding this point. Next, where the larger structure is aimed. I'm sorry, I think I missed this line. Yeah. Accordingly, if care is not taken, I'm here. Accordingly, if care is not taken in how a firm describes such membership, a perception may be created that the firm belongs to a network. Okay, done. Where the larger structure is aimed at cooperation. Again, our favorite word apna, cooperation. And the entities within the structure share a significant part of professional resources, it is deemed to be a network. So now they are doing what? They are sharing a significant part of the professional resources. Now they have given here what professional resources are. So they have reduced the professor's headache of going through the definition of professional resources and explaining. So they have only nicely given what professional resources are. Nicely, they have in the neat format they have given. Well done, ICI. Very proud of you. At least for this point. Okay. So let's see, this is your star. This is your star. So this is in relation to the that it is forming a network. So because it is star, let me just highlight it also. Network cooperation, significant part here. If it is mentioned the stationery or promotional material, it will be a network. Now let's see what professional resources are. Let's look at these points now. Learn with me. Let's see. First, they have given here common systems that enable firms to exchange information such as client data, billing, and time records if they are sharing this. Then partners and staff are the same. If technical department, basically their R&D team that consult on technical or industry specific issues, transactions or events for assurance engagements, if they are common, then you have they have the same audit methodology, the way of functioning, and the audit manual. What should be followed? What procedure should come first? What should be done first? How to do a certain procedure? If all these are common, and if the training courses and facilities are common, training courses and facilities, then we'll say that they are part of the professional resources. Here, the significant word no is something that you will not be able to identify, but I'll tell you, and that is this word and if here or would have been there no, then the meaning would have changed. But however, there is another word here which shows includes. Okay, includes. So professional resources is not only constrained to these 5 points here which they have given. 5 points as in this one, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is fifth. Not only constrained to these points, they are also saying that there can be other points as well. But mainly when we say professional resources, these points which we just read, which I have marked in purple, these areas will basically come. Okay, so be very, very careful in the exam. If they give professional resources and one of these areas, then you should be able to identify, yeah, this is professional resources, and and if there is cooperation, then basically it will be a network. Okay. Also, be ready for professional resources includes what in the MCQs area. So be very careful in that regard as well. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead. The determination of whether a professional resources shared are significant and therefore the firms are network firms shall be based on the, again, see the gray area here, relevant facts and circumstances. Basically, they are only saying that it will have to be seen on case to case basis, which is right also, because see, so many CA firms, when they share resources, what is significant, what is not, will have to be determined on case to case basis only. How can it be exactly the same as what some other firms have got involved into? So it has to be seen on case to case basis. So again, expect a lot of case studies on this in the future exams. Okay, so I think all the professors like me will be very curious to see what kind of questions can be drafted on this area. It will be good. I've drafted some questions based on this network of firms just for the students to identify. So maybe if you WhatsApp it to me, I'll be sending it to you. Just few questions so that you are able to identify whether these are network of firms or not. Okay. Let's see where the shared resources are limited to common audit methodology and or audit manuals with no exchange of personal or client or market information. It is unlikely that the shared resources would be significant. Very nice point. They have clearly said here what forms a significant resource. They are saying that if there is a common audit methodology, audit manuals, but there is no exchange of personal or client or market information, it is unlikely that the shared resources would be significant. It would not be significant if only audit methodology manuals are shared, but the personnel are not, they are not interchanging, they are not exchanging ideas, they are not having the same discussions. If the client information, market information is not shared, then they are saying that the shared resources would not be there in this case. So very important, mark this as a star, because it is a very important, it gives you some light on this matter. The same applies to a common training endeavor where, however, the shared resources involve the exchange of people or information, such as where staff are drawn from a shared pool or a common technical department is created within the larger structure to provide participating firms with technical advice that the firms are required to follow. A reasonable and informed third party is more likely to conclude that the shared resources in this case are significant. So here they are saying if there is a shared pool or a common technical department which the firms have, and if they are exchanging the resources, there is exchange of people here, different departments, different firms are sharing their staff so that the knowledge can be shared and improved and developed. If this happens, then we'll say that yes, it is significant. So here you have 2 points which clearly say that if there is no exchange of personnel, then they are saying that it is unlikely that it would be significant. But if there is exchange of people, they create a shared pool, common technical department, then we say that there is shared resources which are significant. Okay, I hope this is very, very helpful, and this gives you a clear idea and picture in relation to this part. We'll come to this point later, that is point C. Okay, now a very big task that I'm giving you, the network of firms that we started. Basically, from this point number 1 onwards, I want you to read from point number 1 to point number 10. Okay, I understand this is a big one, but I want you to go through it very, very carefully, understand in your mind clearly what is a network, what is not. Because I am very, very sure that if a question is asked on network, it will be most probably coming from this B part. Basically, when I say B, I mean this. Okay, so this B part. So all these 10 points are very, very important. Just go through it and pause this video, go through it, and then we'll continue. Okay, I hope these 10 points are very clear now. Okay, that's it. Let's see forms of network now. Okay, now for this part, now I'll have to take you to the diagram once again. So come to this part again. Now this is where we had stopped, and I told you that I'll be continuing from here. So let's see this part. This is where we had stopped. So let's do the part after that now. Okay, so now let's see in this part, what are they trying to say? If structure of a mutual entity, if structure of the network is of a mutual entity, partnership firm, LLP, limited company, then the words and affiliate, very, very important from exam perspective, the words and affiliate will have to be part of this firm. So the word and affiliate will have to be part of this network. Okay, of this network shall be used in the name of a network to identify the network. So they are saying that and affiliates has to be used as part of the network's name. A firm is allowed to join only one network. So again, a very nice point. This can come in an MCQ. Again, a very important point. So first important point is this, that is and affiliate. Second, they are saying that a firm is allowed to join only one network. Only one network they can be part of. Again, a very important point from MCQ's perspective. Firms having common partners shall join only one network. So, okay, if the firms are having common partners, then they cannot be part of different networks. They have to join the same network. They can be part of only one network. For example, there is ABC and Associates with ABC and ABC as partners. There is also uh, AXY and Associates with AX and Y as partners. So here A becoming the common partner, ABC and Associates and AXY and Associates have to be part of one common network. They cannot be part of two different networks. Easy. So just three important points for you to understand. Now, based on this, we'll be seeing these points, forms of network. So let's see the different forms of network can be as under, again, directly from the article, constituted as a mutual which will network. In such a case, the network itself will not carry out any professional practice. So they are saying that it will act as can be constituted as a partnership firm also. So it can be constituted as a partnership firm subject to the condition that total number of partners does not exceed 20. So again, they are saying total number of partners cannot exceed 20. Okay. Again, this 20 point, very important from MCQ's perspective. Again, a network can be constituted as a limited liability partnership subject to the provisions of the Chartered Accountants Act rules and such other laws as may be applicable. So complying with all the requirements of the legal frameworks. A network can be constituted as company subject to the guidelines. Now, networks, can they be part of companies? Answer is yes. Suppose, for example, if they are providing management consultancy services, so ICA has given the permission that if you are providing only management consultancy services or any such services, then you can form a company. Generally, you don't see a CA company, you see a CA firm. But if you're providing services which are of a nature where forming a company is of no harm, then they are saying that then guideline prescribed by institute for corporate form of practice and formation of management consultancy services company can be taken. Okay, so again, only for this area and areas of like nature, they have said that we can form a company. So again, very important from exam perspective, be very, very careful. Network firms shall consist of sole practitioner or proprietor, partnership, or any such entity of professional accountants may be permitted by the act. So network firms can consist of proprietorship firms, professional accountants, such persons. A firm is allowed to join only one network. We already saw that in the handwritten area. And firms having common partners shall join only one network. This I had marked it as important. Okay. Now the next part. Now this is in relation to the how to apply to form a network. So how do you apply if you want to form a network? So how do you do it? Let's see. First, you select a network name. Then you have to fill something called as a form A. Now what is form A that I've given you here? Let's see what form A is. Let's see what form A is. Form A is nothing but initial application for name of the network. So we are just telling what the name of the network is going to be. This we'll have to submit to ICAI. So we give this form to ICAI. ICAI shall approve or reject within how many days? Within 30 days. Within 30 days. Now, if in this case, if ICAI approves this idea of forming a network with that particular name, if ICAI is approving it, then after approval, ICAI shall reserve the name for 3 months. This is for you to complete the registration procedure. So you have first selected a name, filled form A, submitted to ICAI. ICAI shall either approve or reject. And if it is approving, it will reserve the name for how many days? For how many months? 3 months. Now, what will happen is if the name is not registered in 3 months, so you have to register the name in 3 months, then ICAI shall cancel the reservation. Cancel the reservation if you have not registered it. Now, assume that you have registered it and you have registered the network and you have properly registered it. Everything is fine, no problem at all. Then here, no, in form A, you had just given the form for the name. But after registration, no, you have to again fill one more form telling ICAI that, see, you gave us 3 months for registering and you had kept our name in reserve category. So now we have registered our network name. And so after the network name is registered, we will get the network name registered and then we'll show it to ICAI within how many months? Within 3 months. And after doing that, we'll be filling a form called as form B. Okay. So form A is initial and form B is after we have taken the registration, basically when our name was kept in reserve category by ICAI. Okay. Then after that, if new firms join our network, then we have to fill form C. If suppose the old or the existing firms are leaving the network, then we have to again fill form C. So basically informing ICAI regarding the updates of our firm. So fill form C if other firms enter the network or existing firms exit the network. Within how many days you have to do this? You have to do this within how many days? Within 30 days. So we have to do this within 30 days. So be very, very careful regarding these 30 days. Easy. Again, a very simple part. Hope you are able to understand it in a very simple manner. Okay. Next. Approval of network of names, firms, amongst firms registered with the institute. So here all these examples are given. So let's go through this. This is the procedural part. The network may have distinct name which should be approved by the institute, which will be approved by the institute. To distinguish a network from a firm of chartered accountants, they have said that the words and affiliates, very, very important. This for MCQs, and affiliates of the network, and the words and company and associates shall not be used. So they have clearly said what should be used. They have clearly said what should not be used. Okay. Then they have said the prescribed format of application for approval of name for network is at Form A enclosed. Illustrative examples of names of network are as under. So they have said that if the network is a mutual entity, then we'll or partnership firm, we'll call it AB and affiliates. So you will see and affiliates here. If it is an LLP, then AB affiliates. So you will see affiliates here, AB affiliates LLP. Then if the network is a limited company, then you have AB affiliates private limited or limited. Again, you will see the word affiliates here. So if it comes in the MCQs, then remember the words affiliates. Then you have provision for regulation 190 of the Chartered Accountants Regulation 1988 shall be applicable to the name of network. However, even if a name is approved and subsequently it is found that the same is undesirable, if the name is undesirable, they have kept a name which is not good for public language, then the said name may be withdrawn at any time by the institute. The institute shall reject any undesirable name, and the provisions in respect of names of companies as prescribed in the Companies Act 1956 shall be applicable in spirit. Okay. So if it is undesirable, then the ICA, then institute can reject the undesirable name at any point of time. So they have clearly said here, at any point of time, ICA can do it. That is at any time. Okay. The institute shall approve or reject the name of a network and intimate the same to the network at its address mentioned in Form A, that is the initial intimation that we are given, within a period which shall not be later than 30 days, that is maximum within 30 days, they shall say, from the date of the receipt of the said form. Mere approval of the name of the network shall not entitle the network to carry on practice in its own name. So mere approval of the name of the network, just because the approval of name has been given, has been approved by ICA, that naam chalega, then just because the name has been approved does not entitle the network to carry on practice in its own name. So they have clearly given in relation to this point. One second. Okay. Next, registration of network with entities in India. After the name of a network is approved as per provisions of Guideline 5, the institute shall reserve such name for a period of 3 months from the date of the approval. The network shall get itself registered with the institute by applying in Form B within the period of 3 months, failing which the name assigned shall stand cancelled on the expiry of the set period. So within 3 months, you have to get itself registered. If you don't, then the name will be cancelled. Okay. So you have to apply to the institute in Form B saying that, okay, we have got ourselves registered. Registration of network with institute is mandatory. So they have said that it is mandatory procedure. Okay. So within these 3 months, you have to get it yourself registered. If different Indian firms are networked with a common multinational accounting firm, they shall be considered as a part of the network. So common multinational can be your Ernst & Young, PwC, you have your KPMG, all these firms. If different Indian entities or firms are part of this network, then we'll say that it is a network only. Okay, it is a network only. Easy. Next is listing of network with entities outside India. So again, this is in relation to FNG, very easy areas. The duly authorized representative of the Indian member firm or firms, member constituting the network and entities outside India shall file a declaration with the institute in Form D for listing of such network within 30 days from the date of entering into the network arrangement. Okay, so they will fill something called as Form D if they are forming a network outside India. Proprietary individual members, partnership firms, as well as members in LLP or any such other entity of members as may be permitted by the Act shall be permitted to join such network with entities outside India, provided that the proprietary individual members, partnership firms, as well as members in LLP or any such other entity of members are allowed to join only one network, and firms having common partners shall join only one such network. So that we have already seen that they can only join one network, and common partner shall join only one such network. Easy, simple, similar to what we had already seen earlier. Change in constitution of the registered network. In case of change in the constitution of the registered network on account of any entry or exit from the network shall communicate the same to the institute by filing Form C within a period of 30 days from the date of such change in the constitution. So any new firm entering, any existing firm exiting, then we'll file something called as Form C with ICI within how many days? Within 30 days. Clear, easy. I hope this is very, very helpful. And this was a good session for you all. What I'll again request you all is please study and ensure that you are doing this part very well. Again, my suggestion is if you have any queries, approach me on WhatsApp. If you're not my student, then please write in the comment section on YouTube. Whenever I get time, I'll definitely reply and you will be satisfied with the reply too. Okay. So don't worry, enjoy, all the very best. I wish you great success in this exam. From CA Karthik Iyer, I would like to say to you a big thank you. Take care. Bye.